Good morning. My name is Matthew R. Kearns, and I serve as the Associate Director of Member and Alumni Relations for Focus St. Louis. Focus is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to educate leaders, connect leaders, and facilitate important conversations for St. Louis and our surrounding region. Today is our second sneak peek into our new series, Focus, Elevate Leadership, a continuing education program designed to fulfill our purpose of continuing to inspire and equip leaders. These professional development courses will immerse participants in breakthrough thinking in order to grow their confidence, knowledge, and networks. Today's topic, critical conversations, how to choose courage over judgment in difficult times. Our guest, Justine Froelker, is an engaging speaker and educator. She is also one of fewer than 700 certified Dare to Lead facilitators trained and certified by Dr. Brene Brown. For more than 20 years, Justine Froelker has worked in some capacity of traditional mental health, helping people cope with their stress in a healthy way, communicate more effectively with people they love and lead, and walk in their whole truth. Justine is also the author of 3 best-selling books. She gave 2 TEDx talks in 2017 and currently travels speaking for workshops, retreats, and corporate trainings. Justine will deliver content for the first section of this webinar, and following that directly, we'll take your questions. I ask that you submit your questions to the question and answer panel at the bottom of your screen, and I'll read them to the entire forum for Justine to answer. We'll try to make it to everyone's question today, but if we're unable to answer yours, you can email me at matthewk@focus-stl.org, and I'll talk with Justine and I'll reply with an answer. Please make sure all microphones are off. Focus St. Louis would like to thank lead sponsor Citi and presenting sponsor Daugherty Business Solutions for this opportunity. And now, good morning to Justine Froelker.
Hi. Thank you, Matthew. I always, it's a lot less awkward on these webinars to have my bio read before I come on. When I'm speaking in front of an audience, I never know where to look when someone is reading my bio. So I just thank you, Matthew, and thank you to Focus for having me. I am excited to be here, and I'm also nervous, especially considering when Matthew called me about this amazing series about critical conversations. I got super nervous with what came out of my mouth next when I was like, yeah, let's do this. And he was like, oh, okay, it's about critical conversations. And I said, okay, could we be really brave? Will you guys be brave with me and let me do the lesson on judgment and choosing courage over judgment, and that maybe perhaps people are doing their best? And so Matthew was like, yeah, let's do it. And so this is what you need to know, quite possibly the most life-changing piece of the courage work that I teach. And it is also the most annoying part of the courage work I teach. And I think right now, during this extremely weird and very difficult season that we are in with COVID-19, it's really, really easy to choose judgment right now. And we're living in a time that feels easy because judging you for not doing what I think you should be doing during these times or should not be doing during these times feels a lot easier than just feeling all my feelings. And there are a lot of feelings to be felt during this time. And remember, I am a licensed professional counselor by trade, so you kind of don't get to have a webinar with me without talking about feelings. And I think when we first started this weeks ago, especially here in the St. Louis area, it was feelings of maybe fear and anxiety, probably lots of frustration. And it took us maybe a little while. And I was saying kind of the whole time, like, hold on a second. This is a whole lot of profound disappointment and uncertainty and grief. And for some of us, this will be trauma. And that is whether or not you have experienced any level of anxiety or trauma or grief in your past. And this is all bringing it up again, or if this is bringing it new to your life. And so what we know is that during times like this, especially uncertain, scary, frustrating times, it is easier for me to hurl my emotions onto you than to do my own work and becoming self-aware and feeling my emotions. And so that's huge when it comes to judgment. And it's huge when we're in a time like this. And so I kind of want to do a little bit of background. Like there's this piece of like our brain is wired to stay comfortable. Our brain is wired to keep things simple. Good guys, bad guys, safe, unsafe, black, white, dark, light, healthy, unhealthy. And that's what makes all of us pretty good judgers. I'm a therapist with 20 years of experience, and I am pretty judgy because our brains don't like to feel uncertain. And vulnerability defined in this data is emotional exposure, risk, and uncertainty. If those three things don't describe the season that we are in right now, I'm not sure what does. And so what happens is because our brain is so wired for comfort, to stay safe, and when we're in times of uncertainty and feeling all of these feelings, our brain is going to make up stories. Our brain is literally wired for story making. And so when I read a headline, but don't click on the article, when I see people gathering in public and I think they shouldn't, when I feel like I'm the only one wearing a mask and I feel like everyone should be wearing a mask, when I don't think that that's an essential trip that you need to be making, in that lack of data, in the missing parts, because my brain is wired to stay comfortable and because my brain is wired for story, I'm going to make stuff up. Our brain has to have a beginning, middle, and end. And the beginning is I'm hooked by emotion. I see something, I read something that I deem that's not okay or not good enough or is frustrating or scary to me. And my body gets hooked by the emotion and I feel it. So I feel it in my body, head, chest, belly, and I want to hurl it. I want to say that you're not doing your best. I want to say that you are making decisions to deliberately hurt people, that you're being malicious. You'll even hear people say, people just suck on purpose. And even if you're not someone that would say that out loud, your brain probably thinks it, especially in times like these. And so I'm hooked by emotion. Something happens at the beginning. I'm hooked. That end result is they're not doing their best. They are hurting people. They're making poor decisions. That's poor leadership. They should have chosen something differently. And so my brain makes up the middle part. It makes up stories because I don't want to feel my emotions. And so there's this concept in the courage work based off of Brené's research that I teach of living big, living with boundaries, living with integrity, and living with the generous assumption that people are doing their best. And let's just take the season that we're in right now. The road that you live on is too busy at 5 o'clock and you're thinking people should be staying at home. It's now in order. Your spouse or your partner won't wear the mask out that you made them because they don't think it's that big of a deal. Your leader chose to do reduced hours and reduced pay over furlough, and you really needed to be furloughed. Or maybe it's the opposite. All these decisions that we're all making in a time of uncertain crisis and major feelings of grief and loss and maybe even trauma, and we feel like it's easier to judge you than to feel our own stuff. And so just to kind of give you, I'm going to give you 2 examples because it kind of helps set the stage for understanding this concept that is so annoying. Are people really doing their best? So the first example, I'm not going to do a COVID example. I'm just going to do an everyday real life example of myself. So before this season, when I was traveling, speaking and doing corporate training and things like that, or I would have lots of local events, I was working from home, but then going to different events. I have 3 little dogs at home. They have to be walked, otherwise they drive me crazy, just like your children at home are maybe driving you crazy. And so I get them all wrangled up together and I'm walking my 3 tiny dogs through my neighborhood. And just like every day that I walk them, Bosco, our older dog, decides he's got to go poop. And I know this seems like a silly example, but let's think about it. And I realize I didn't grab the bags. And I have that moment of panic, like, oh my gosh, are there any leaves? Are there any leaves that I can pick up? I cannot leave this poop here. And I have a meeting right after this. I can't drive back into the neighborhood and go pick up this poop. I'm like, I didn't cut myself enough time. Like, I got to leave it. I got to leave it in his yard, my neighbor's yard. Did I really set out on purpose to make that happen? And so like, there's this element, and I know it seems silly, but like, maybe you're my neighbor who then goes and steps in it, and you're really, really mad. I even come back to try to find it and pick it up. Was I truly just setting out to be malicious and unkind and to hurt people, or was that my best? This concept of people doing their best, it is not a discussion of whether or not we can learn and grow and improve. It is a concept of, will you choose to live your life as if people are doing their best? Because when you choose to live your life that way, you get to live with less resentment and anger. And in a time like this, those things will not get us through this to the other side better. They won't help us feel connected, especially right now when we're disconnected in so many ways. And so that choice of maybe that's their best. Because for years as a therapist, this is what I would teach to my clients, because so many of us struggle with forgiving ourselves. In that very moment that you made a mistake, that you chose wrong, that maybe you even hurt someone, you did the very best that you knew how in that given moment. If you had known better, you would have chosen differently. That applies to us and it applies to others. If we keep insisting that people just suck on purpose, we are the ones that have to live resentful and angry at the world. We're the ones blaming other people for not meeting our expectations. Because I don't have control over you. I don't get to change you. I only get to control how I think, feel, and behave. And so if I choose to believe that people are doing their best, if I choose to believe that my leader is doing their best, that my coworker is doing their best, that my spouse or partner is doing their best, I've got to wrestle with the emotions that come up if their best isn't good enough for me. Because remember, just because this isn't a conversation about whether or not people can grow and change, it doesn't mean that they're withholding stuff from you on purpose. And there's a Facebook post going around right now about this, about like what this kind of looks like. It's not calling it the generous assumption or do you choose to believe people are doing their best. It's this post about like, you know, that person buying paint at Home Depot and you deem that as a non-essential trip. Or for me, this just happened the other day. I was walking the dogs and I saw these two teenagers walking through the neighborhood across the street. They did not have masks on and they were the same age and they were walking very closely. And my first thought, because I didn't want to rumble and wrestle with my own fear, my own anxiety, my own frustration, all the feelings that all of this season brings up for me, because I wasn't willing to lean in with vulnerability and wrestle with the emotions that I'm feeling, I hurled it onto them. In my head, I'm thinking, there's no way they're from the same household. Why are their parents letting them hang out? This is why we're not ever going to get out of this shutdown. And I like even came home to my husband, Chad, and I was like, these two boys were walking. And of course, Chad, for those of you who may follow me, you know, my husband, Chad, is an accountant, CFO, and he is not a therapist, but he has been grenaded to death. And he was like, you're making up stories. Sure am. Because at the end of the day, we don't know what someone's story truly is unless we seek to understand it. Those two boys one could be adopted. They could be twins. One might be from the household down the street and both his parents are healthcare workers. And so he's been living with his neighbors, right? And so there's this element of there's these stories that we don't know. And when we hurl our judgment onto other people because we're not willing to get curious about what we're feeling, that only continues to tear us apart. It doesn't bring us together. And healing will never take place in disconnection. And I know that some of you might be thinking like, well, what about racism? What about really poor leadership where people are being hurt and things like that? That's where this work gets really, really annoying. Because what happens is this concept of, do I choose to live my life as if people are doing their best, does not mean that I don't experience righteous anger. Because I do need to speak up about that. I do need to speak up when the boardroom or the table is not diverse, because healthy boardrooms, healthy teams, healthy tables are diverse. And so I want to embrace this middle world of owning my own emotions, becoming self-aware of what it's bringing up for me, and this space of choosing to believe that that is your best, even if I don't agree with it, even if it's not good enough for me, even if I think it downright sucks. That's tough work. That's courage work. That requires us to get curious about what the stories are we are making up. Our brain is spinning. That makes us get curious about what this is bringing up for us from our past, our worries about the future, and things like that. And so what we do with this concept in regards to, will you choose to believe people are doing their best so that you can stay out of judgment? We call it living big, and it's big is an acronym. So in the lesson, what we do is we kind of ask people, like, do you think people are doing their best? And I don't let people talk, and I write down, do you think people are doing their best? And it's usually, I'll tell you, it's like half and half sometimes. Some people are like, no, people don't try. People are just lazy. People are not doing their best. And then other people are like, I think people are doing their best. And those people almost apologize for answering that way. And what we have found in this data, and we found it super quickly in this data, that the people who say no, people are purposely setting out to hurt people, to be malicious, people just suck. Those people, they have one thing in common, and this was met with saturation in the data super quickly: perfectionism. They're really hard on themselves, so they don't cut themselves a break ever. So they won't cut you a break. That came up in the data super quickly. And when it comes to this assumption of, will you choose to live as if people are doing their best, it requires us to do our own work in regards to setting boundaries. That's the living big part. So if I find myself judging someone and thinking that their choices are not okay, I really am struggling with them, I want to stop and look at living big for myself. Be in the living big boundaries. What's okay and what's not okay. And if I don't know what's okay or what's not okay, I'm going to ask. I am also going to state what my boundaries are. I'm going to say what is okay and what is not okay with me. I am going to ask for what I want and need. I will state my expectations out loud and stop expecting people to read my mind. The I in living big is integrity. This is the trickiest one. This is the trickiest one. The definition of integrity that we use in this courage work is choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, and easy. Choosing courage over comfort, living out our values, and not just professing them. The trickiest part that I have really learned, especially in this last year, especially in this season about integrity, is that your definition of right may not be mine. What you think is right, what you think is okay, may not be what is okay with me. And this doesn't necessarily mean that yours is right, mine is wrong, or yours is better, or mine is not as good. It means that if I'm going to choose to live my life with courage, if I'm going to choose to walk out my truth and to live wholeheartedly and to practice the skill set of empathy and vulnerability and courage, I'm going to seek to understand where you're coming from. I want to seek to understand, how come you think that's okay? How come you still are getting together with your friends when I feel like it's not okay? Will you help me understand? Walk me through. I'm going to use curious language when I sit beside you via webcam right now to seek to understand where you're coming from. Especially if you're someone that I work alongside with, especially if you're my leader or someone I lead, or if you're one of my loved ones. I want to seek to understand you without judgment. And I'm going to tap out of judgment, even though my brain wants to lean into it so much because it feels safer than being uncertain. So integrity, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, and easy. The toughest part about that, though, is our definitions of right might be really different. And then finally, the G in living big, the generosity piece. Will you choose to live your life as if people are doing their best? That you're going to give them the generous assumption that that is all they have to give in that given moment. And you will stop blaming people for not meeting your expectations, especially not meeting the expectations that you haven't stated out loud. People aren't withholding from you on purpose. And the toughest part about that piece is that if that is all you have to give right now, and it's not good enough for me, that means I have to set boundaries. That means I have to change how I interact with you. That means I have to do the work of courage, which is not setting out to change you. The work of courage is becoming self-aware of what it's bringing up in me. The work of courage is seeking to understand where you're coming from. And so that requires us really to get curious about what it's bringing up. And so like in these last couple minutes before we open it up with questions, I want to kind of talk about that learning to rise process, because I walk by those boys on the walk who I deem are not from the same household. They're too close. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. My job as someone who wants to live with courage is to stop, because I recognize I am totally triggered. I feel it in my belly. I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my head. I am triggered by emotion, which means I am functioning out of my fight, flight, or freeze response. It means I'm kind of not fit for human consumption right now. Because if I interact with you right now, triggered by that emotion, I'm going to hurl my emotion onto you. And we hurl our emotion the most onto the people we love and lead the most. It means I react from my emotions instead of responding to my life. And that is not courageous. And so I'm going to recognize the emotion in my body. I'm going to feel it in my belly, my chest, my head. I'm going to realize I'm not fit for human consumption. I need to take a break. I'm going to breathe, because breathing helps me bring the physiological response down, which means I bring my thinking brain back on track, out of fight, flight, or freeze response, which right now in this season, a lot of us are living in 24/7. We got to breathe to get out of that. We have to pay attention. We have to be mindful of not over-attaching or over-identifying with our emotions. And so I'm going to breathe, pay attention, be mindful, bring my thinking brain back on track, and ask myself the most life-changing question of this work, which, what's the story I'm making up? The story I'm making up in that scenario, oh my gosh, their parents suck. Their parents are letting them get together still. We're never going to get out of quarantine. Why can't people just listen? I don't understand this. We're all going to die. Just your head will take it. Your head is wired for story. So your head will create tons of drama. And it's usually inaccurate. And so then the next piece of that is to get that story down. Write it down, type it in your phone, say it to someone out loud who you love and trust. And say like, okay, I'm like totally making up a story. And you look at it, you speak it, and frankly, most of the time we just see are crazy. It's crazy. That's crazy. And plus, above my pay grade. I don't want to be the judge and jury. Plus, I'm the one miserable all the time. And so I'm gonna then look at the story that my head is making up. I'm gonna have brought down my physiological response. I'm gonna name my emotions. Am I in fear? Is this stress? Is this overwhelm? Am I frustrated? I'm going to name the emotions, and I'm going to do the work to become emotionally literate, which means having the actual words for your emotions, because there's a lot of different kinds of happy, mad, sad, glad, disappointed. There's a lot of different kinds of that. You got to have the words, name the emotion, cope with them in an effective way, speak them out loud, breathe, to bring your thinking brain back on track. Stop hurling them onto the people you love and lead. Allow those emotions to move through, because emotions are energy. Because when we do the work of courage, our emotions don't write the whole story. Our emotions are no longer the thing that we react to and hurl onto the people we love and lead. They become a part of our story, and we become the author again and stand in our truths and our values and choosing courage over comfort. And so when you feel that angst, the next time you read a headline, the next time you have been sucked into media, social or news, the next time you see someone doing something that you deem as not good enough, we're going to check ourselves. Because the work of courage and vulnerability and empathy, our world needed them before this. Desperately. Our world needs them even more now, because we will not get through this without one another. And although we are disconnected in so many ways and talking into a dang webcam, what feels like for some of us 12 hours a day, we are not limited in choosing skills of courage. We are not limited in our presence. And that does not mean that we set out to change other people or to convince other people or shame them or judge them into change, especially in a random comment on Facebook. It means that we wrestle with what it's bringing up for us. It means we stop and own our own emotions. It means we seek to understand other people, because judgment and fear and shame will never motivate change. Courage and empathy, love and self-acceptance, and acceptance of others will. And it's uncomfortable, and it's messy, and it's real annoying. And it'll change your entire life if you lean into it. So there's my soapbox on courage. So Matthew, hit me with your questions. I'm kind of nervous.
Hello, don't be nervous, you're awesome. I always like talking to you so much. I'm going to ask this question that I think is going to be hard, as everybody else is going to go to the Q&A panel and start typing in questions that they might have. Okay, so I get real cranky at the grocery store when you're not wearing gloves and you're not wearing a mask and you're getting in front of me and getting in my space and grabbing at food that I'm trying to politely reach for. How do I check in and go, okay, that's me, not them, and I still want to be mad and grumpy and cranky?
Yeah. Well, and I think the first check that we have to do is like, is that a space where you need to ask for what you want and need? Like, whether or not it is in your own behaviors or in actual words of that person that you don't know, right? Like, do you need to ask that person, like, actually, like, can you take a step back? Like, with this whole thing going on, like, I'm not comfortable with you being this close. Or do you just need to move yourself because whatever, you feel the energy or you don't have it in you to not say, ask that nicely? Like, we got to be honest with where we're at in that moment, right? And then that other piece is, because that's the boundaries part. What
Right.
boundaries do you need to state with your mouth, but also then with yourself, right? A physical boundary. But then the other piece is like, is for you to be really lean in, become curious, like, okay, like, I don't think this is okay. And what could be going on for that other person? This is not to make us feel sorry for other people. It's just to help us understand that people got a lot of stuff going on. Like, and so when we're feeling big emotions, it's our stuff. Take nothing personally. That book, The Four Agreements, it's not about you. It's not. And so I want to check my own stuff. And so in that example, that's going to happen a lot. And however long we're in this is, do I need to state something out loud? And half the time it's probably no, let's be honest, right? Do I need to move my body so that I am comfortable? Because it doesn't seem to bother that person. Well, that's not of your concern. You are of your concern. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally.
Okay.
Totally, because I internalize it, but I mean, and you know, it's a leadership thought where you're like, well, I'm being a leader in my community and I'm following the rules, and you're not following the rules.
Uh-huh.
That's what my brain does.
I know.
And I can't be the only one. Someone else on this phone call or on this webinar has to feel the same way, you know?
Absolutely. Like I got a text message from one of my teacher friends the other day who is a single mom and is, you know, sharing custody. And she's like, I'm so frustrated by watching people break the rules. She goes, I'm lonely too. I want to leave too, but I'm following the rules. And I was like, I know, like, what's it bringing up for you? Okay. It's bringing up my own loneliness, my own fear. Like, because you don't have control over the other people.
What was the G in big?
The G is generosity. Giving people the generous assumption that that's their best, that that's all they have to give. So it's generosity. Yeah,
that's really great. Do you have any tools for dealing with someone quiet and / passive, avoidant, who withdraws at opportunities to communicate?
I think we just have to ask, like, use curious, courageous language of, hey, for me, I feel like we use I and for me a lot, not you, because as soon as someone says, here's like, you're withdrawing, you're disappearing, like that's defensive, right? Like I'm going to have to defend myself, or why aren't you showing up? Defensive. Using words like, hey, like for me, I feel like you're kind of disappearing. Is everything okay? What does support look like for me? What do you need? Yeah. Can you help me understand what's going on for you? And if you're not comfortable sharing it with me, can I bring someone else in, right? Or who are you willing to like kind of check in with? Because we have to be honest with, like, especially as we're leading virtually, you might not have that level of trust with some people. However, we're humans, and especially as a leader, it is, if you are noticing someone disappearing, check in with them and do it in a way of like, for me, I'm kind of noticing this. What's going on? Are you all right?
Yeah, and with our teams, with our work teams, we're all in different places now. We're all on different schedules now, on so many different schedules for so many various reasons. What are any thoughts you might have on empathy, generosity, kindness around somebody who's sending emails at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that is literally the only 10 minutes they have to do it.
Yep, correct.
And not just from the other teammates, but for themselves.
Right. Well, gosh, there's a couple of things there. Like, I think there is checking in with that person of like, hey, I've noticed that your emails are coming through at all hours of the night. I just want to make sure that that's actually when you're choosing to work or having to work and not working too much, right? Like, are you setting boundaries around this, right? Yeah. Because we've asked people for years to bring work home, and right. Never allowed home at work. And, you know, especially in the Dare to Lead work, we've been saying like, nope, you're one person, one whole person. It's one and the same. And now we have no choice. But there's that element, there's that piece of that. I think it goes back to that generosity part. Like, they could have a spouse that's in healthcare, 3 tiny little kids that they're now trying to figure out how to homeschool or e-learn, and they don't have any other time to work. And so like, to kind of check in with people, like it's a visual. Sit beside people and seek to understand what's going on for them.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand what's happening? I just want to make sure you're doing okay, because I'm noticing your emails coming in late, or I'm noticing that you've shown up late to several Zoom calls, or you've missed one, or you've missed this deadline. Can you walk me through what's going on? What's your day like? How can I support you? It's
Yeah.
all that curious language part.
Yeah. Do you think it's easier or harder to be vulnerable and empathetic virtually? I know, right? That's a great question. Thank you, Susan. It's a great question.
A very good question. You know, and I did a pop-up courage workshop on my Facebook like a week or so ago, and I had this line, this line came out of my mouth. I never said it this way. Like, we are limited in our connection right now. We are not limited in our presence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your presence. I don't get to hug you. I don't get to sit across the boardroom table from you. I don't get to shake your hand right now. I can make eye contact with the webcam. I can show up with my presence of courage and empathy. That empathy is, I don't have to be going through exactly what you are going through to identify with the emotions that you might be feeling. Right? Like, so even like, take me for an example. My husband and I cannot have kids. And so we're stuck at home with 3 little dogs, no children. I have lots of mom friends. Yesterday's announcement was devastating for all my teacher friends, for all my mom friends. I don't have to have 3 little kids running around this household to understand the devastation, the profound disappointment, grief, and sadness that came in that announcement. I simply have to be willing to lean into the emotions of fear and sadness and grief and say, hey, this really sucks. Are you okay?
Yeah.
No simple answers, no quick fixes, because right now there aren't any anyways.
Right. So the other question, just to stem from that, is how do we address that with the kids who have those feelings of disappointment and scared and are missing their friends and missing their teacher?
I know.
And hate having their parent as a school teacher. I mean, let's
Yeah,
like, yes,
you have to
different.
say some of the funniest memes right now are all about the parents and schooling, and like they are funny. Yeah. And I've done a couple videos on the kid thing. Like, I think let kids feel their feelings. Mm-hmm. Let them, for God's sakes, let them struggle. Let them struggle so they know how to rise. Let them see you struggle a little bit also. Like, make sure they feel safe and that they know that they're being provided for. Give them the words around emotions. Let them know that it is okay to feel whatever they are feeling right now, because some kiddos are going to be so excited. Some are going to be devastated. Some will be different every other day. And that is normal. Help, like, teach them that language of courage, that piece of what's your feeling? Let's name it. Give them the words. Are you feeling anxious? Like, I have had so many parents say to me, like, well, I don't want to tell her that she's anxious because then she's going to have a word for it. I'm like, she already knows. She's feeling it in her body. Give her the word, right? Because when she has the word, it doesn't own her whole story. When we wrap words around things, it loses some of its dark power around us. So, like, give her the words. And so model that work, use the words, coping skills. And like, I say this with adults and with kids, feel your feelings and don't dare wallow in it for too long.
Yeah. As leaders in our region, the question that I would ask for them is, there are some difficult conversations that could be coming down the pike as we go on. What is your thought, and what are the teachings of Brené Brown that we can bring to the table when we have to have those conversations?
I think one of the biggest pieces for leaders to remember, and we're going to be in it throughout this whole thing because things are changing so quickly, and because companies are in such different seasons, right? Like, you know, like at first maybe the company was trying to figure out how to keep everybody, and then it was like, okay, maybe we can do pay cuts and reduced hours to keep everybody. And it was like, nope, maybe we got a furlough because they make more money, and like, but still all these pay cuts, and it was all happening at different stages for all of these different companies. So the first thing to remember is, it is okay to not have a decision right away that you are confident in and that you're not ready to announce, as long as you know for sure the longer you wait, the more stories people are making up. In the lack of data, people are filling in the missing pieces with their own stories. And yes, there is a reason for hierarchy. There's a reason for boundaries. There's a reason that not everyone can know everything. That is appropriate. And at the same time, there needs to be this awareness that people are spinning on their stories. And so there's a lot to be said for leadership to say, we're not sure right now. I promise you, as soon as I can tell you, as soon as I know more, I will tell you. And I don't know about for you, but for me, I'm feeling scared. Like, you own it. Model the work for them and help them feel safe to say, this is hard. Because if we don't create that space, they're gossiping, finger pointing, and blaming. They're doing all their own things of the way shame shows up in workplaces, us versus them. Oh, that's just C-suite, but we're floor leaders. Like, they don't understand. Like, we got to come together on it. And I think in a season like this, come together for a lot of us means saying, none of us know what the heck we're doing.
Yeah.
We're doing our best. And I promise I'll let you know as soon as I can.
Wow, that's a really powerful answer. Yeah, and good, because I know that question is coming up a lot, and it's about so many different things and so many different vehicles when it comes to workplaces, what they do, how they're doing it now, if they can do it now, et cetera, et cetera. How do you feel, or how do you deal with your neighbor, your friend, your spouse, et cetera, who lost their job, lost their income, and you didn't? How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
On both sides.
On both sides, right.
Yeah.
It is definitely asking for what we want and need and practicing empathy for sure. Because we also can't forget that you don't assume that you know how someone is feeling based on what's going on for them, right? Like, because there are going to be those people that they're happy they're furloughed.
Sure.
They could be. Then there's some people that they're going to be mad that they were kept. They're working more for less pay. Just like there's a bunch of essential workers who feel like they're not essential and they don't feel safe right now. And they feel unseen and unsupported. And so that first thing is, don't assume that you know how someone is feeling. What would it be like for you instead to seek to understand and get curious about what they're feeling? Like, and I'm living in a house, like I'm working more than ever. And at the same time, my events have been postponed, obviously. And so I'm working more than ever for a lot less pay. Whereas my husband is working a lot and has technically kept his job. And so it's like for us to sit down with one another and seek to understand, and him to understand this, like for me to say, I am profoundly disappointed and sad of what this has meant for my career. And you're like busy in the bedroom all by yourself, and I'm like talking to a webcam by myself every day, and for me to ask for what I want and need and say, like, I need you to show up at the end of the day and still talk to me. And he's like, okay, I can do that, except like I've been talking to people and dealing with people all day long. Can I go outside for a break first? Right. So like it's both pieces of ask for what you want and need and set boundaries. And that includes for your neighbor, for your friend, but like, don't assume that you know how someone is feeling. And then also like ask them, seek to understand them, and then also state what you need and want from them, because you're in different places.
Gotcha. As we're wrapping up our time, because this time goes so fast, are there any last thoughts you want to share?
Oh, are you talking to me? Sorry. I got distracted by the chat. See, that's why I never
Justine, as we're wrapping this up, are there any last thoughts that you would like to share?
I think the biggest thing is be real uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be. We have never done this before. None of us know what we are doing. We are doing our best, and sometimes our best just is not awesome. And we can begin again and choose differently next time. And so it's that piece of choosing courage over the judgment, over the fear, over the anxiety, over the comfort, and really becoming self-aware and doing your own work.
I'm going to share this with you as a last comment. The group I lead has women from different cultures and countries. They are away from their families. Some have loved ones very sick in their country and they can't go there. They're very hurt and fearful. I've made some Zoom conferences. How can I find comfort for them in this situation?
Oh. Show up in your presence without simple answers and quick solutions. And I will tell you, like, as I have taught this work across many different cultures, like, people are people. More than that, feelings are feelings. Like, even if their culture doesn't like express them in the same way or whatever else, like they're feeling them in their body. Give like provide them that presence to create the space to feel it all, and for you to get real uncomfortable that it isn't your job to fix it. It's our job to show up and help people feel seen.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank
You're
you to
welcome.
everybody who came today. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for all of your work. Justine is part of our Elevate series. We will have an in-person session with her when we get past all of this. So stay posted. We'll keep you posted about that. Join us next week for the psychological associates joining us at 11 o'clock. And again, we just want to thank our sponsors, Citi and Daugherty Business Solutions, for making these opportunities possible. If you have any further questions, feel free to email me at matthewk@focus-stl.org. And otherwise, we will see you next Friday. Thank you so much, friends. Thank you, Justine. Have a great day.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
we'll see each other soon. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.